Hello, and welcome back to the Mid-Am Podcast. We are your host. I'm Tyler Munns, and across the screen from me is my good friend Nathan Furumasu.
Hello.
It is at the time of recording. It is PGA week. All the big wigs. Anyone who's anybody is in Orlando. So naturally, we are not. And it got me thinking. Before we jump into today's topic, which is stats. And I'm gonna throw in a little like sub category of data in general. Um, I got to thinking. I was watching a lot of like stories and stuff from people that I follow on Instagram at the PGA show, and just you're seeing all these brands and manufacturers all in one place. Looks very cool. Looks very fun. We were just talking before we hit record that we'd love to go someday. But I was thinking, man. Since the kind of resurgence of golf with COVID, golf seems to be getting a little bit crowded from a manufacturer's and a brand standpoint. And so, like last night, just kind of when I was chilling and decompressing from the day, I just was like, hey. Thinking of golf club manufacturers specifically, just because I'm an equipment nerd and Nathan's the same way. I was like, man, how many? I don't even know if I could name off all of the like just iron manufacturers. And so I like went on a little Google search mission. And so here's the list. I have no other reason to bring this up other than it's interesting. And I'm interested to see how this continues to progress over the next couple of years as like we crest the peak. I think we're getting pretty close to that. Cresting the peak of kind of like golf's resurgence in popularity. So if we look at the major OEMs, we've got Titleist, Callaway, TaylorMade, Mizuno, Strixon, Ping, Cobra, Wilson, XXIO. I don't know if I'm saying that right. They're not like a major OEM, but you can buy them on like
I think it's Zexio or something like that. My buddy's the rep
Zexia.
for Cleveland Strixon, and he
Yeah.
says it that way.
And then Tour Edge. At least that's what you like can buy on like TGW or whatever. Then you've got these three brands that have recently have seen a resurgence. Ben Hogan, which is, on their 7th or 8th live at this point. Power Built is coming back in a big way.
What?
Yes. Yeah, dude. Power Built. They're releasing some irons, and Todd Dempsey did a bunch of persimmon drivers for them, and they actually look sick.
That's right. I did see those. I didn't know about irons though.
Yeah, they posted like kind of, I think they were showing that because they had teased like the brand coming back with the Todd Dempsey stuff like months ago. Well, they just posted about their irons. And then McGregor recently just posted that they're manufacturing irons again. Okay, so that's OEMs and then resurgent brands. Then we've got direct to consumer. New Level, Tacoma, Sub 70, Haywood, Cali, I don't know, Avian, PXG, Maltby, Sticks, Birdie Golf Design. I'm sure there are more that I missed, but there's a lot. And then you have your like specialties, right? You have your like National Custom Works, Mira, Kyoe, all of those like kind of like JDM, Korean market stuff. So that's a lot, dude. That's just iron manufacturers. And then like, you got putter manufacturers, you got specialty wedge manufacturers, and then you've got anyone who's like has the access to the internet and go to like tourspec.com and buy blanks and try to grind them themselves and call themselves an iron maker. So I don't have a point. I just wanted to kind of like thought experiment or just make an observation that, hey, golf's getting crowded. And then, I didn't even want to get into the apparel stuff, but good Lord, gosh. There's a new apparel company, and I'm putting air quotes, which reminds me, we simulcast these. Not only can you listen to our beautiful voices audio only, but you can also find us on YouTube if you want to see our pretty faces. I'm putting air quotes around apparel companies because I would say 90% of them are just buying blanks off Alibaba and having their questionable logos screen printed or embroidered. So
yeah, they just go to whatever warehouse Colin Landforce has recently posted about and and find out the MOQs and whip up a logo on paint and then send it off. And
yeah. What do you mean I have to buy 500? I just want 4.
What?
Sorry,
What?
dude. Um, cool. Well, yeah. All right. Diving into our topic du jour, stats. So,
Onto the
um,
main course.
on the main course, stats, statistics. We are in a pretty data heavy uh, segment of golf history, especially within like the last, I'd say like 5 to 7 years. Data golf,
The
strokes
shot link
gained,
era.
shot link era. It's the LPGA is now thankfully they're starting to produce some of that data out there to show how incredible those women are. But it's just it's a different time than I think maybe a lot of even myself and you when we first started to get in the game. Like it just wasn't it just wasn't like available. And then if you go more on the data side, not necessarily like statistics, but like the actual data. So thinking about like swing and club and ball data, that certainly, I just started seeing TrackMan towards the end of high school. And it was like, Red Tail had like four. Now they have like one in every stall. Um, so we wanted to kind of like run down some of our ideas on stats, some of the things that we, track that we think is valuable, things that we think maybe people put too much weight into. And, at what point is, diving deep into the data pool, detrimental to your ability to play golf. So, um,
Mm-hmm.
looking at some of the questions that we came up. So I'll start and I'll ask you, Nathan, what stats do you track?
Okay, so Matthew Fitzpatrick
I
and
do.
his history of keeping statistics of every single shot that he's played since like junior golf days. I am essentially the antithesis of that.
Mm,
I historically have kept no stats with any kind of regularity. Partly because we like you said we grew up in the maybe our first foray into golf was more like fairways, greens, putts, as far as like what the conventional stats were to take. Um, as I got more into golf, was the same time about where Mark Brody started to write books. I read Every Shot Counts and decided, well, good. I don't need to keep track of those because they're pointless. Um, and then having at least a cursory understanding of strokes gained, I quickly came to the realization that I don't have enough data to make worthwhile statistics within the strokes game paradigm, so I don't bother. So if you're asking me which stats I keep, um, nothing formally,
okay.
like nothing. I do I have been, as we've spoken about plenty on this podcast, I am really trying to improve my game off the tee. So I
Hmm.
have been sort of keeping mental notes, at least as far as not even fairways, but just like how many times around do I have to can I play for the green on my second shot? Do I even have an approach shot essentially? If I'm in the rough, if I'm in the fairway, whatever, do I have an open look at the green? That's what I care about. So, I want to I'm trying to keep track of that and also reduce obviously the amount of times where I have to like pitch out sideways. That's predominantly the only one I'm really focused on at the moment, just because that's what I'm working on in my game.
Mm, interesting. Yeah,
So,
that's it's the the point that you made specifically about not having enough data points to like really make diving into the nitty gritty even like statistically significant is I think is a big thing that is like I we'll get into it in a little bit, but because
yeah,
I'm going to talk about
what
golf
stats do you
metrics. But
what stats do you keep?
so I'm the opposite of I'm definitely more in the Matthew Fitzpatrick camp. So
Good.
I've
Yeah.
always kept lots of stats. At a bare minimum, it is fairways, greens, putts, distance on approach shot, and the distance of my first putt. So like that's something I've always kept. Wrote in my scorecard. My scorecard looks like absolute chaos. It makes people sick to their stomach when they see it. It's anxiety inducing. I get it. And then as I learned more about Mark Brody and the strokes gained, and saw that he had his own app, Golf Metrics, I downloaded that and paid for a 6-month subscription. And I got lost in the sauce a little bit. I got to say,
Mm,
I got very into like literally tracking every single shot.
mm,
And, so it's like, you track your tee. And for those of you who don't know, Mark Brody developed and kind of coined the phrase strokes gained, and all the math that's around that as a way. And so when you hear that on broadcasts, that's what they're referring to. And his app Golf Metrics basically allows you to kind of tap into the math of that by tracking kind of your own stats and tracking literally every shot that you hit on the golf course, recording the type of shot it was and the distance to the hole it was. And so, it's like you're in the app. I always did it on my scorecard and then did it in the app later, but it was like, you hit your drive, hole number one, 342-yard par four, you hit your drive. Okay. Your next shot is in the rough, but it's, you have a shot at the green. So you're just going to say, you're going to note that it's in the rough and you are, 80 yards out and you hit it, you hit your shot, then you get up there, you walk off your putt. Putt is, roughly, let's say 18 feet because you made 6 steps from the hole to the ball. You make your putt. If it goes in, you record it as such. If it doesn't, you record the distance to the hole for the next putt, and then so on and so on and so on. And then at the end of the round, it breaks down in excruciating detail where your strokes gained were, your strokes gained or strokes lost against it. You can compare yourself against a scratch golfer, or you can compare yourself against a PGA Tour pro. And so I got super into that over the summer, just fascinated to see like kind of fluctuations in, when things were really hot, what was working and what wasn't. And then like looking at more of like a 10 to 20 round average, where did things line up? And so, um, I, like that experiment, I learned a couple things. I learned that I have an idea of what stats are important, at least to me. And then I also I actually really liked, and I fell away from really getting it, like recording stats to that level of detail towards the end of the season. Um, but I did like that it forced me to really slow down, like especially on the greens, like walking off. I think that will be something that I do probably for the rest of my playing career, is walking off my putts, to be like, okay, this is a 40-foot putt. And just to like add a little rep to the brain to be like, this is what a 40-foot putt felt like. And then like, this is an 18-foot putt. This is what an 18-foot putt felt like, and just slowing that down, like really feeling the contours of the green in my feet as I'm walking back and forth. And like, maybe, it gives me an excuse to go look at it from the other side and not rush myself. So I like that aspect of it. That's not necessarily, stats related, but just it's more of a process thing. So I really like that. But yeah, I really like the stat stuff. I'm exploring decade golf right now, purely as like a kind of journalistic endeavor. Just very interested to see what it's all about. But I do think that like, as you get better and better and better, and we've talked about this before, like once you get into this upper echelon of golf, like you're no longer looking to save strokes. You're looking to shave a quarter of a stroke here, a tenth of a stroke there, over, a number of rounds. And so, when you're thinking about, okay, how can I practice to save that quarter stroke or that tenth of a stroke here? Um, like things like golf metrics, or I'd imagine even, decade golf, it says it does the same thing. Um, that's going to tell you like, hey dude, you are dropping strokes on short games specifically from this distance. Hey man, like your strokes gained versus a scratch player, which is where you want to be, in the 60 to 80 yard wedge range was bad. Like, okay, cool. So I'm going to work on that. You're or off the tee, like you're, you're terrible, or you're really solid, or your putting's trash, and from these distances specifically. So like, maybe your lag putting's fantastic, but you get inside 6 feet, like, 2016 Jordan Spieth, and you can't make anything. Um, it's
Yeah.
like it's interesting, but you can certainly get way too bogged down on it, and um, it certainly can be detrimental. But I find it super interesting, so I'm a big fan
Yeah.
of it.
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not like against stats. I
Mhm.
just am lazy mostly, and then like to sound like I'm above it all, and I know so much that I don't have to that I don't have to keep them. But I mean, I I think, of course, keeping stats can be beneficial to people.
Mhm.
If it wasn't, then the pros wouldn't do it, right? Like everybody, even if it's not them themselves, if it's somebody on their team or whatever, there somebody's looking at their their strokes gain, you know, printout, readout, or whatever, and saying, okay, here's where we need to improve. Here's where we're not doing well. Here's where we're doing well. I think, you know, intuitively you can know, but there's definitely been times where um you feel like you're doing really well with something, but then if you look at the stats, you're like, oh, actually, you know, that that's I was actually doing better with this other thing and not so great here. And
Yeah.
if I look back at the round with like the cruel lens of objectivity, all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, I really do need to practice this. So no, I am for statistics, and
Yeah.
I would say even at every level, probably there's a certain amount of investment in statistics that
Yeah.
is going to um, produce good returns on investment, so to speak. Um, I just don't do
I
it.
think I think that one of the things about the standard greens, like in my opinion, and this kind of maybe goes into our question about like what maybe is or isn't important. In my opinion, the just tracking your fairways, greens, and putts, if that's all you're going to look at and try to glean anything from it, you might as well just not, because there's so much qualitative that falls behind the quantitative at that like high level of of you know data record. um I just don't know what you can like thoughtfully take from that.
Mm.
So like, for example, so in my everyday life, I do a lot of retail data analysis for my job. And if
Yeah,
you
you were
gave
bragging
me,
about Excel spreadsheets today on Instagram.
yeah, yeah, dude, index match, get on my level. Uh, so like if you gave me a data set and gave me an hour, I could come up with 5 different narratives that tell wildly different stories, but it's all the same data. The numbers are all the same. So how could I say 5 different things that maybe lead you to 5 different conclusions with the same numbers? Well, there's like this qualitative aspect behind the quantitative data that like, if like you can tell a story. And so, thinking more about golf, it's like, oh man, I had 36 putts today. That, the average scratch golfer is somewhere between like 30 and 31 per round. 36, that's terrible. Damn, that's terrible, dude. What'd you shoot? 72?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, I hit 18 greens. Oh, well,
yeah.
shit, that's fantastic. So it's like,
I was 50
okay,
feet away every green. So.
yeah, or it's like, yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, you hit 8, or yeah, you hit 18 greens. Um, but that even out, it's like, okay, you hit 18 greens, man. That that's so cool, but it's tough. It sucks that you two putted everything. It must have been a bunch of long putts. No, I was 10 feet on every single putt. Now all of a sudden, yeah, okay,
Oh,
now
then
that's
you're a
actually
bad
a bad
putter. Yeah,
that's a
yeah,
bad putting
yeah.
round. It went
Yeah,
from like great ball striking round, and maybe it was just, an average putting round to, no, that was a phenomenal ball striking round, and you sucked at putting. Oh my God. But like,
yeah.
there's so many, like, you can't look at any one thing and not understand that, like, okay, you had 0 3 putts, but how many of your first putts were outside of 40 feet? Because, that's where anything outside of 40 feet, that's where your average putts to the hole start going, is over 2, where you're more likely to average a 3 putt than you are a 2 putt, as you hit
Yeah,
40
I
and
mean,
beyond. So
I think, yeah, for sure. Like the most rudimentary stats, fairways, greens, putts, whatever, yield the most rudimentary insight. In the
mhm,
sense that, like, okay, if you're a raw beginner or you're just kind of just getting into it and really just trying to start to finally look at your game and see, like, okay, well, how do I get better at this? And you have no concept of like how many putts is a lot in a round, and you go out and you shoot 85 and you're like, well, I had 50 putts. Like, okay, you know, narrow it down. That's at that level, it's like, okay, I should work on my putting.
right.
So I think there's some fair insight there at that level, which is kind of what I was saying earlier. I think like at
Yeah,
each
yeah,
level of skill, probably the stats need to get more and more sophisticated for there to be benefit. So I think, because then, like you say, it all depends on the context. Once you
yeah,
kind of go to the next level of skill, it's like, okay, well, I had this many putts, but was it because I um, hit greens but was way away, and so I need to work on my approach game actually, and my putting is okay? Or was it that I hit it tight all day long and I putted like, a mess? And so yeah, then I think it requires context for those to be meaningful, or to be looking at them in conjunction with one another. Like if you're saying, oh, well, I only hit 4 fairways today, but I hit, 13 greens. It's like, well, okay, so you probably didn't miss the fairway by a lot, so driving is not the issue. So you kind of have to
right.
start pairing them and clumping them together to make them a little bit more sophisticated for that benefit. But then, yeah, even like the I would say like the other end of the spectrum is something like I heard about, I think it's the Stack now has this putting app
Mhm.
that it gives you like, okay, 15-footer uphill, right, left to right or whatever, and it has you putt that, and then it just kind of, um I think it's an AI generated thing where
Mhm.
it starts to give you a bunch of different putts to try and hit, and then it keeps track of, okay, well, you suck at right to left putts,
Mm.
so then it starts to give you more of those. So then that's even just like that much more nuanced. Or you suck at left to right putts but only outside of 10 feet, kind of thing. So it's like that's pretty sophisticated. Maybe a
Yeah.
little too under the microscope for your average
Yeah, unless
golfer,
you're
but
playing like high
yeah,
level competitive, that's tough.
yeah.
One of the things that Decade does that this is the only like feature of the app that I've used is they have a simulated putting round drill that's fantastic. So it gives you 18 putts, and it's the 18 average length putts in a PGA Tour round. So and it shuffles them every time you do it. And so what you do is um your tells you your first putt. Your first putt's 18 feet. Okay, cool. So you putt. And then for any putts that's outside of 10 feet, you not only record the score, but you also record how long or short you were, because your speed control is the number one according to Decade. And I would say a lot of people would agree with this. Like a lot of really good putters is like your speed control is like your number one. Because if you can even like if you can read a green with like some level of proficiency, if you have perfect speed, you're almost guaranteeing yourself a 2 putt, which is like the name of the game. Anything outside of 6 feet, really, like you should be just like, well, I really want to 2 putt this.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so anyway, so it just goes through and then it gives you like a score at the end to say like, hey, your speed coefficient or whatever it is like 1.5, and your number of putts was this. And then it compares you against like the USC, like men's D1 college team. And then it tells you, how good you are. And for me, like from a practice standpoint, like I do a little bit of work on like skills and technique, but then like my practice session is just I just do like 2 simulated putting rounds. I do a technique thing, so like gate drill or something, and then I do a speed drill, just to try to calibrate the speed. And then I do like 2 simulated putting rounds and that's it. And like my putting has improved remarkably in the last, few months. Um, Not that I've played a ton, but I feel like uber confident over when I'm on the greens. Like I can actually make quite a few putts. And like we played together and my putts were my putting was much better, I think, than when we had first played together at Wildwood, like not too long ago. So, um, or Persimmon, and we played at Persimmon. But anyway,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, I
but
could see that.
yeah,
I thought you rolled it nicely at Langdon.
I was playing pretty. I mean, I was rolling it
Yeah.
pretty decent.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think
For sure.
the other aspect of the data that I think is important that maybe even people that are like somewhat high level players don't that could be beneficial, not necessarily like to track their own stats and understand, but like just understand at what level the highest or this the stats of the highest level skilled players in the world, right? So like, understanding that when a tour pro hits it in the trees, they're making bogey 80% of the time. Okay. So like,
Mhm.
what's that say for you? Don't try to thread it through the window, man. Just chip out, play for bogey. And like, you're doing what tour pros do 80% of the time. Like understanding that average proximity to the hole of a PGA tour player from 100 yards is not 4 feet. It's
So much
18
so
feet.
further.
It's
So much
18
further.
feet. And like, granted, their pin locations are tougher to get to and things like that. But if you scale it back with like skill level, it's like, it probably all kind of almost cancels out. And so it's like, yeah, dude, if you're 100 yards out and you're an 8 handicap, getting out on the green is a good shot. So don't beat yourself up if like you're 30 feet away after, with a sand wedge in your hand. You're not that good.
Yeah.
And so
No,
like,
and
don't,
that's TV coverage. I mean, we see Nick Dunlop shooting, 60. He's hot. He's making everything. There's a reason why we're seeing him, and he's in the lead and he's making a ton of birdies, so everything's going in. That's not real life. All the guys that missed the cut, they missed all those same putts. You
and so
know.
I think like just understanding that, like truly understanding the data aspect of it, because yeah, like, ESPN or Peacock or wherever whichever platform you have to watch it on, um, they're going to tell a different story because they have to sell, they got to
Yeah.
keep your eyeballs and no one wants to watch some dude like grind to shoot a 73.
Yeah, the only time you see the opposite is when it's like Ernie Els 5 putts the first green at the
Right.
Masters, or
Yeah.
Kevin Na makes a 16 or something on that one hole, and it's just like when it's more like a train wreck, and it's kind of hard not to watch.
Yeah. It's like a car crash. Uh, so yeah, so I think like just, not robbing yourself of like joy out on the course by setting expectations that are like literally impossible to meet. I think stats helps with that too. It certainly helped me. Also helps me with decision making where it's just like, hey, like my
Yeah.
likelihood of getting up and down here if I try like this insane shot that like I've never practiced and I don't even think I could, I could hit, stand here for 30 minutes and hit balls and probably not execute it. Like, no, let's just protect par and, chip out and take my medicine and move on.
Yep.
And so like having a
But
baseline
also,
understanding of those stats, I think
sometimes there's a window,
sometimes
and you
there
got
actually often there's a window.
and you
Hey, and
gotta live a little,
if
live a
you're in a
little
match play
every
situation,
time.
you're going after
Oh,
all the windows.
oh,
There's no reason not
oh,
to.
exactly.
That's why you got to
And
play more match play.
that's funny though, because it's like, oh man, the statistical golf is boring and stuff, and it's like, yeah, but until you actually do it, and when you go out there and you have that internal battle of like, I see this gap, and I know I probably could do this. Mm, You know,
There's a reality
three,
in which I could pull that off.
three out of, yeah, exactly. 3 out of 5 times, like I can make this happen. But I also know 5 out of 5 times is the safe play, and
Yeah.
that internal struggle, and then the mastery of yourself to like chip it out, and then pitch it on, and then make the
And
putt.
then make the par.
If you
Yeah.
do it, it's like way more satisfying than had you pulled off the miraculous shot and then two putted for par.
Yeah,
It's like,
because you feel like
uh,
you feel like if you pull off the miraculous shot and then make the par, you feel like you like stole one. and
Yeah.
it
It's
feels a little scummy, you know. But then when
yeah.
you chip out, even when you chip out, you get it on the green, you miss the putt, you make bogey, you
Yeah.
still are like, you know what, I took double bogey out of play, I
Yeah.
played really smart, I'm proud of myself for like overcoming my
Yeah.
emotions and like that primal urge to like be a hero.
Yeah.
And
It's
yeah.
I think it's more satisfying, especially if you make the par. That's like a big time
Oh
flex
dude.
like moment. That
Yeah.
feels really good.
Yeah.
So statistical golf is not boring at all. It's actually I think really fun to kind of think your way around a course. In the sense that like links golf is trying to play the course on the ground and sort of and use the
Hmm.
contours and really kind of like outwit golf, right? Same thing with being really analytical and statistical and choosing like the correct in air quotes
Hmm.
correct thing every time and having it pay out. It's like you're cheating at slots or something. It's like, oh, if I do this every time, I know statistically that someday this is going to pay off for me and it's going to be really satisfying.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know how to cheat at slots. If I could, I wouldn't be doing this podcast. But I imagine
Oh no,
if you
there's
could,
someone who cheats at
if you
slots,
could,
it's the
if you could,
casinos.
yeah, 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 if you could, and you knew, like, I just gotta do this many times and bet this many,
Well,
whatever. I
well,
don't
it's
know.
like it's like blackjack actually. So actually,
Sure.
blackjack is one
Yeah.
where it's like it's really
Yeah.
just a test of patience. You know, you start with
Yeah.
you start with your pot, and then basically play the book. And it's as long as you're willing to sit there for a few hours, like you're going to come out ahead if you play by the book, because like mathematically it's going to work out. It just, you have to have enough sample sizes. You have data points to like, for it to, for you to
Mhm.
regress to the, or progress to the mean of, yeah, you're going to, win. And you don't have to win 100% of the time. You only have to win like 60% of the time in blackjack to like make money. And
Yeah.
so it's more about being patient. And that really comes back to this idea of, like we say it before, is like on the course, being patient. It's like,
Yeah.
wait, pick your spots, wait for your time to come. Like, don't push when you don't necessarily have to, because the law of averages is king, is going to come and get everyone. You can't, you can't really force the issue. Um,
Mm.
in like a macro sense, obviously you can make
Sure.
decisions in the moment to influence, but like, if you step back and look at golf as like this, a career type thing and not just this one instance, this one shot, it's like, well, if I make smart decisions over and over and over and over and over again, because I have a good understanding and a good foundation of like statistical analysis, um, my scores are going to improve. I'm going to have better outcomes in the long run. And a lot of times it just takes a lot of the stress away too. Like for me, if it's like, you know, like
Hmm.
if you can sit there and just be like, hey, I know what the right choice to do is, so I'm just going to do that. I'm not going to waffle on it. I'm not going to go back and forth, because it's just burning my mental energy. So like, let's just do it, and then go, and then start making
Yeah.
another good decision from there, rather than like opening up Pandora's box of like, well, it hits this tree and then kicks out, and then you're like, shoot, what am I going to
Oh,
do? I don't.
little gust from the gods roams. Give me another ball. Yeah. That I this kind of leads to one of my questions that I added right to the end of the list, but and I'll just sort of say this for now. I think it depends on who you are as a person as well, and like the type of golfer you want to be. Like, do you want to win big and lose big, or do you
Yeah.
want to like be this steady Eddie, like super dependable, reliable, like scorer? So,
Yeah, and I think like, as I've gotten older, and I think a lot of people are this way, just because like as you get older, you just get more conservative in, you kind of just want to
we've
be
seen
a little,
things.
yeah. And so yeah, change,
I've
you
been
become a little
burned.
less change averse. Yeah. So it's like,
Yeah.
dude, I used to think that like, no, dude, I want to go out there and fire birdies. I want to, stuff pins. And I'm just like, you know what? My number one golf goal is to win a trophy. My second golf goal is to hit 18 greens.
Mm,
That's what I want to do. Like, oh,
Mm,
dude, if I went out and shot a 72 with 18 greens, I would be ecstatic.
I
Uh,
wouldn't. If I
I
hit
would,
18
dude.
greens, I better be at least like one or two under. But that's
I,
because
I just wouldn't care.
I'm a
Like, I
good putter
literally
though, and I'd be
wouldn't
like,
care. Like, I would be
mm,
so detached from whatever happened on the greens that I hit 18 greens. I just like literally couldn't care less. It's like just the level of consistency that you have to be operating at to hit 18
mm,
greens. Cause that means you had
yeah,
realistically, you had 18 opportunities to hit the green. So it means your tee game was probably pretty solid and your ball striking
yeah,
was incredible. And your decision making was probably really good too. Cause like you
yeah.
probably didn't go for sucker pins. You probably just aimed for the center of the green and you executed. And that would be very like as a 30 going on 34-year old, that sounds hot. When I was 24, that
Whew,
sounded dumb.
whew. That's funny because I'm like, nah. If I hit every green, I'd be so bummed if I shot even par. But at the same time, I could back up one step from that and be like, if I hit 14 fairways, though, I'd be walking like head tall with a little Rory bounce in my step. I don't even care what happens after that. If I'm in the fairway, the sun shines brighter, the birds are chirping, flowers smell better and stuff as you stroll down the fairway instead of having to slog it over into the trees. But yeah, I could probably shoot 90 and hit every fairway.
Yeah. So, but that, that's like, that's the objectivity or subjectivity rather of golf. It's like,
Sure.
like
Yeah.
I want it, dude, I want to be a ball
Yeah.
striking machine and you want to, um, you want to hit every fairway and then after,
Yeah.
then go home.
Yeah. And
So,
then go home. That's all I care about, really. But that's
uh,
just because that's because of who I am. I already know I'm pretty good at the rest, so I kind of know if things will take care of themselves from there. So, and you know, you're you're not the flip side of that, but anyway,
yeah.
yeah. Anyway,
Um, so I was going to say like, so for me, like the stats that I think are most important that are indicative of like good golf. I think the king of all stats is greens and regulation. I think if you're hitting greens and regulation, you are shooting good scores, and like it just like your seat, or I should say your floor is very high if you're hitting a lot of greens and regulations. Now
sure.
your
It
ceiling,
encompasses it encompasses a lot, like you just said. It means you were decent off the tee and you were a pretty good ball striker that day. So
I think your ceiling comes into that is the putting aspect, and that's I think why a lot of everyone says it's like when you're looking at a pro tournament, the winner is the best putter of the best ball strikers that week. So it's like if you're not striking the ball well and you're having to like you can't. It's really tough to scramble around for a 65. Super hard. But if you hit 16 greens, 65s like at that level are certainly in play. Um, I think putts per hole rather than just like overall putts, but like putts per hole, I think is an important stat.
mm.
Just understanding that like, hey, like, one putts and three putts, like, where is that falling? I think for like people our level and worse, like just how many doubles around and how many three putts outside of 40 feet, or inside of 40
Yeah.
feet rather are, cause like three putts inside
You know
40 feet are
what? You know what? I lied to you. I do keep track of doubles because I
okay.
hate them. I
Mm.
that's kind of been like the one thing that started last year though. Like that's recent where it's just like I want no doubles, no doubles, and in 2024 I'm looking pretty good, mostly because I haven't played. But that's kind of
You're
you
one for
know
one, right?
I'm one for one, yeah, and
There we
I'm
go.
playing again this weekend, so we'll go two
There we
for
go.
two.
Love that.
So yeah, I do keep track of a stat, I guess, but it's
There
really
you go.
loose. It's like,
And
oh, I had a double
it's more out
bogey.
of
Dang it.
spite.
Yes,
You're
exactly.
just like,
It's
oh.
not about improving. It's just about I don't want to make double bogeys.
And my last one is penalty strokes. Like understanding penalty strokes, whether it is bad decisions or bad swings, at bad times.
Yeah.
So understanding why those penalty strokes are coming into play and then like trying to learn from that. I think like that core group right there, if you can really understand like the causes and correlations around those stats, you're going to like improve quite a bit, or like you're going to see, desirable scores. Um,
Mm.
and then the kind of the last little bit of that is going back to something I said at the beginning of the episode with data as kind of a subcategory, with the advent of affordable, I'll put that in air quotes as well because that's relative, but affordable launch monitors in the last 3 to 5 years, um, understanding like what your true carry distances are and understanding what your like dispersion rates are with each club, that is also like something that's probably a little underrated, especially like for the high, mid to high single digits and beyond. It doesn't take much, like rent
Mm-hmm.
out some simulator space for like an hour and hit every club in your bag, or, for a couple hours, maybe do that twice to get a couple different data points, and like be thoughtful in how you record that data and like examine it and draw conclusions. Just be like, okay, cool. So my dispersion with my driver is roughly 50 yards. Let me remember that when I'm thinking about, this tee shot where I'm trying to fit it into a 23-yard gap. Probably not a good
Mm-hmm.
idea. My dispersion with my sand wedge is also 50 yards. Maybe I should work on that. That doesn't seem right. And then also understanding that like what your true carry distances are, and then using that to like plus or minus based on conditions. So it's like, hey, I know that my carry distance on a regular kind of 70-degree day, no wind, for my 7 iron, it's like 170 yards. Okay, well now it's 45 degrees. What do I think that's going to take off? Like, oh, why,
Mm-hmm.
like, so you're not asking yourself the question, so I'm 170 out, I hit a 7 iron and I came up
Yeah.
18 yards short. What the hell? It's like, well, it's cold.
Yeah. I think
Ball's not
I
going to
think
fly.
yeah, I think statistics like that are I'll just go ahead and say, like, I would say that dispersion type, or like spectrum shotgun pattern type um, statistics, if we'll call them that, are
Yeah.
far more beneficial to golfers than
Round data.
performance round data. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they have direct correlation to your performance, and also can directly benefit your future performance. Um, versus like some days you just go out and you know catch a couple of bad breaks and it skews data, or some days you go out and you just don't quite have the speed of the greens and it's like, well, was it a bad putting round or was I doing what I wanted to do? It was just kind of a little off, so I feel like round data can always be skewed in some way, shape, or form, and I think that you can always look at it like you were saying. You could create all kinds of different narratives. I could always look at round data and say, no, but I really am a good putter. I don't. I just things just didn't fall today, or
Yeah.
XYZ. I hit a pebble, on the green, or whatever, a pitch mark, or So I that's one of the reasons why I've kind of been so laissez-faire with statistics, especially like round data style statistics, in my entire quote unquote career as a golfer, is because I just don't see the direct benefit. Whereas if I know I always hit it within like a 40-yard gap off the tee, then I can pick any part of the fairway wider than 40 yards
Yeah.
and hit
Just
it
fire
there.
away. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it won't matter. And you can always play yourself away from trouble. Like, you should never be in a hazard then, because you can always kind of position your aim point somewhere so that your entire dispersion spectrum falls away from the trouble, and then you never have to worry about anything. And then your scores are immediately going to drop. So like, I like that style of data far more. That is one of my answers to the one of our questions of what kind of stats would you like to keep track of.
Yeah.
I care more about that stuff. Like, I intend to get on a launch monitor and spend some time here early in the season and try
Mm-hmm.
and iron these things out, or just kind of take notes and jot them all down like you're talking about, because I don't have a Mevo Plus like you do, and you know FlightScope hasn't been talking to me because they don't know who I am.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Hey, you can borrow mine though.
Yeah, sure.
Um, yeah, no, I think like that you're spot on. It's like you can take a lot of the stress out around if you are like, hey, I know if I aim here and I don't have to really think about it. I don't I know that my average shot is going to land safely, so I'm just going to fire away. And then like you're probably going to hit a really really good tee shot because
Yeah.
you don't have to worry about negative results because you've done the work ahead of time to know. I know that I'm going to hit my drive within a 40-yard cone, and I aimed
Hmm.
at a place that is not going to put me in trouble. So I just fire away.
Yeah.
And if I'm a little left or a little
Yeah.
right, as long as it's an average drive, which is what
Yeah.
you should expect, then it's gonna be fine.
Hmm.
And I feel like when you take away that doubt, like gosh, then you're just off to the races. But you have to like remember to govern yourself a little bit when the when you're starting to feel like real confident and you're like, well, I know
I
my
think,
dispersion with my 8 irons 20 yards,
yeah.
but I think I can go after that
But I've been hitting them
top
at
shelf
15
pin.
all day,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna go let's
Yeah, I'm gonna
tighten
go
that
after
up a
that
little
top
bit.
shelf. I'm gonna hit it up to that postage stamp.
Yeah.
No, don't do that. Yeah. So
Yes.
the ones that I think are not important for me personally, that I just don't that I don't think tell a good enough story, which is kind of slap in the face to you for what you said earlier. But I think fairways and regulation. I
That's
just
purely
like
pride. It's purely
I just don't think that's not, I just, like, cause then a lot of times, like when I miss a green, I don't miss a lot of fairways or I don't put myself in trouble too much off the tee. And when I do miss fairways, it's like, yeah, it just like it's rolled 2 yards into the rough. Like
Mhm.
technically I didn't hit the fairway, but like I still have a phenomenal chance at hitting the green. So like, I just don't put like I've had rounds where I hit like 5 fairways and I'm just like, well, I don't know. It just doesn't bug me all that much because I'm sure in a lot of cases, like I was just off the fairway.
Mhm.
And like, it doesn't really matter because like depending on the course you play, obviously the difference in shot difficulty of missing a fairway versus missing a green are like night and day, two totally,
Mhm.
they're not comparable. So I think fairways in regulation may be a little bit overinflated. I think the idea of total putts, I think I mentioned this before, like maybe
No,
total
that's
putts
useless.
isn't really that indicative of like a good or bad round because
No, it's
like that
pointless.
so many other things have to be taken into consideration. And then this goes back to like the last one is understanding expectations and setting appropriate expectations for your skill level. But like birdies and pars, like a number of birdies in a round, number of pars in a round, it's like you're not shooting bad scores because you're not making birdies. You're shooting bad scores because you're throwing up eights. So like don't do that and your scores are going to be better. It's way easier to not make bogey than it is to make birdie,
Yeah.
or not make double than it is to like necessarily make a par. So
Yeah.
I think like
Yeah.
those are ones that, if you don't put a ton of weight into them.
Yeah. My few that I had under the not important list we've already covered. I mean, it's
Mm,
just kind of for, because I answered it like not important for me. So, like I
yeah.
said, the rudimentary ones, they don't do anything for me. They don't help me, they don't hurt me. There's no reason for me to track them, I don't think. Um and I would even say probably for myself the other end of the spectrum. Like I don't need to know. I almost think it might hurt me to know like, oh, I am worse at 8 foot right to left putts and I'm better at, 15 foot left to right downhillers or something like that. Because then that would be in the back of my head when I get out on the course and it would mess with me because I'd be like, oh no, this is a putt that I'm not good at,
Right.
rather than just trying to react to the target in the moment. Like statistics like that would get into my head, and so
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
if I got too myopic with it, it would be to my detriment.
That makes sense. Well, that's pretty much all I had for stats and data.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
cool.
My last one, which I think again we kind of covered them all at the same time, but
Hmm.
just like my last thing that I added was like, are statistics for everyone? Are they for every type of golfer? Because I would say Dustin Johnson has had a pretty good career. I'd be amazed if he could tell you any of his statistics.
Yeah.
You know, somebody's keeping track for him. Don't get me wrong. Like, somebody's telling him, hey, you probably need to work on this a little bit.
Yeah.
But if you asked him, what his strokes gain was, they'd be like, I mean, his eyes are already glassed over, let's be honest. But the lights are on, but nobody would be home answering that.
No.
And I think, he's one person, but I think there's probably more DJs out there in the world, especially of like people who are uber athletic and just good at
Yeah.
golf to a certain level. Like, some people don't need to know that, because it's just gonna, like I just said for myself, it's just gonna get in the way. Um, or even the overly analytical, it's just gonna
Hmm.
screw them up, because then they'll notice it when they're out on the course. I don't need to know how wide a fairway is when I'm teeing off, because sometimes the visual um, perspective of it from the tee box is different,
Yeah.
and it's going to look more open than it
Open
really
or
is, but I'm going to feel more comfortable about it, and I'm
yeah.
going to send it and probably hit a better shot. Whereas if something is 70 yards wide but there's tall trees on either side, and I'm going to get all cagey, like, it could go both ways. It could comfort me in knowing, oh, well, this fairway is actually really wide, no matter how visually intimidating it is, versus this fairway is a lot narrower, and there's not really a whole lot of safe space up there to be aiming within, but it looks super open and inviting, so I'm going to send it. you know
Right.
um I'd get more nervous then on the tee,
Yeah.
and so I think it depends on who you are as a player. This is kind of
Hmm.
harkening back to what I mentioned earlier. I kind of buried the lead a bit, but I don't think statistics are for everyone. To
No.
some degree, sure, you need to look at what you're good at and what you're not good at if you want to improve. But
Well, I think that's the caveat. That's the big thing too. It's like, hey,
that's yeah.
unless you're like putting scores into the Gin app and
Yeah.
and going through that thing and like really care about that and want to
Yeah.
see like improvement, then like
Yeah.
yeah, like it's probably a good idea to start understanding the weaknesses and the strengths. It's important to understand what you're good at too, so that you can continue to kind of like hone that and maintain that skill. But like and feel confident and be like, hey, I know this isn't just like my observation. I'm looking at actual, there's like hard data that says like I'm very good off the tee.
Yeah.
And understanding that and running with that confidence, but then also being able to like really zone in on your, what things that you can work on to see, because the whole mid am thing, right? What the like the
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 premise of our
crux of what
show.
we're doing is like we need to be as efficient as possible, right? We need to,
Right.
if I have an hour, 3 hours a week to practice or whatever, like I with the intent of improving my scores,
Yeah.
then I need to be really efficient in how I use those 3 hours. And so
Yeah.
data, I think, can help in that aspect. And then if you look at things like dispersion charts and and launch monitor data, that can help in the, your actual in round stuff, because you have a better understanding of your game from like a numbers perspective. So you can,
Hmm.
point, shoot, and go with a certain level of confidence that like things are going to work out, because you did the work ahead of time to say like, I know what my carry distances are. I know what my basic dispersions are off the tee. So I can make good decisions, with that data and probably not put myself into too much trouble.
Yeah. I think we fully recognize that, like, the desire to improve is when statistics become important. If there's I think we can acknowledge that there's a large swath of people probably who play golf for many different reasons nowadays, and that's becoming even more in vogue. Um, and I totally resonate with that. There are, we both have days where we go out with the lumber and a half set and
Yep.
hit shots and try and be creative, and it's because it's fun, and you're not out there trying to, you know, perform. And sometimes you're out there just to have a good time with the people who you're playing with because you haven't seen this person in a while. And golf gives you an opportunity to spend what should be only 4 hours or less together, um, to socialize and walk and hang out or ride in a cart, whatever. So yeah, statistics are not for everyone. We know that. But if you're trying to get better, in some way, shape, or form, they are for you.
Try to figure out what works for you. Like,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and don't be afraid to explore it. It could be good. Could be good. So could be the move.
cool. Yep.
Hey everyone, thanks for tagging along for this episode. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast on whatever app you are listening to this on, and throw us a rating. Give us 5 stars. Throw us a little bit of a review. We'd really appreciate it. You can find us on Instagram at Midam Podcast. You can find me personally at Fade and Fairway on Instagram, and you can find Nathan at Thistle Leather Goods on Instagram. Everything will be in the show notes. Music credits will also be in the show notes. But until next week, we'll talk to you later.
Take care. Bye.